If you think you've seen courage, you haven't met her yet. This is the nearly unbelievable true legend of a 90-year-old Yakut woman who stood between 1,000 starving wolves and the last snow sheep on Earth, armed with nothing but her memories, her fire, and her unbreakable will. If this story grips you even half as hard as she gripped life that night, hit subscribe right now so you never miss another tale of impossible bravery. Now, buckle up. This one changes you. The winter that swallowed Yakutia in 1963 would settle in history as the kind of cold that bit through bone and memory alike, and in that cold, far from any town, lived a 90-year-old woman named Varvara Timofeyevna, a legend even before the Night of the Wolves. Though she never once called herself strong, she had buried 2 husbands, raised 6 sons, survived famine, fire, and a Siberian river cracking beneath her boots, yet the people in the region still said she had a softness in her eyes that didn't match a life of such brutality, a softness reserved especially for her beloved snow sheep, a rare ancient breed native only to the hidden mountain pockets of Yakutia, animals she had protected for decades from poachers, storms, disease, and time itself. And on the night her story begins, under an aurora slicing across the sky like a green and violet wound, Varvara felt something deep in her bones whisper that danger was coming, not the kind of danger that pricks the skin, but the kind that turns the forest silent. Even the ravens refused to croak, and the old dogs at her homestead, Arka, Bayan, and Little Mosca, paced endlessly, whining and flicking their ears toward the distant ridge, where rumors had been swirling for weeks that a superpack of wolves, numbering possibly 1,000, had formed out of hunger after the Great Freeze killed nearly all the wild prey in the region, driving even the proud, solitary alpha wolves into desperate unions with rival packs, creating a single massive horde that moved like a black, living river through the taiga, devouring everything in its path. And when Varvara heard the first low, rolling howl thunder across the valley like a drumbeat of doom, she did not panic. Instead she leaned heavily on her walking stick, made of larch wood and older than her youngest son, and muttered, "If they come for my sheep, then I suppose they come for me too," before lighting her lantern and stepping outside where the wind sliced through her coat like knives, frost forming instantly on her eyelashes as her breath crystallized in the air, because somewhere deep in the corral behind her cabin, the last remaining herd of Yakut snow sheep, 28 in total, each descended from a line she had saved during the Soviet collectivization years, were huddling together, shivering, unaware that an army of predators had marked them as their last chance before starvation, and Varvara, though wrinkled, frail, and bent from age, felt a fire in her chest rekindling, the same fire she felt the night she faced a bear alone with nothing but a torch when she was 22, the same fire she felt when she dragged her feverish youngest son on a sled through a blizzard to the doctor 20 miles away, the same fire that had always whispered to her, "Life only wins when you refuse to lose," and so she prepared, gathering her grandfather's flintlock rifle, worthless for distance but capable of a loud, terrifying shot, 3 old kerosene bottles, some cloth, her fire poker, her only axe, and a bundle of dry cedar bark she had been saving for emergencies, then stacking them in a neat line on the snow as the wind thickened with the scent of oncoming wolves, a deep musky odor that carried pure hunger. She looked to the ridge again, and this time her heart clenched when she saw movement. Not shadows, not trees, but dozens upon dozens of glinting eyes catching the aurora's shimmer, and with them came the low thundering crunch of thousands of paws marching across the frozen earth, a rhythm so massive it shook her cabin door, and though she felt the first flicker of fear slice across her spine, she straightened, bracing her weight against the cane, whispering to the cold itself, "You've taken enough from me, tonight, I protect what's left." And with that, the first chapter of her impossible defiance began, as the wolves poured down the ridge like an avalanche of living shadows. When the wolves reached the valley floor, they did not immediately charge. Instead they fanned out in a wide crescent that gleamed with predatory intelligence, their forming arc slowly tightening around Varvara's homestead like a noose made of fur and fangs, and Varvara, gripping her axe with one hand and her walking stick with the other, felt every heartbeat slam against her ribs as she understood something chilling. These were not ordinary wolves acting out of instinct but a desperate, coordinated superpack behaving almost like a single organism, and she realized the story's elders whispered, of ancient wolf kings guiding packs with uncanny order, might not be myths after all, because at the center of the formation emerged a colossal silver alpha wolf, taller than any she had seen in her 90 years, its coat shimmering under the aurora as though woven from ice and moonlight, its eyes ancient and unnervingly calm as it stared at her, not with madness or savagery but with something like solemn recognition, and for a long moment creature and human regarded one another in a silence so deep even the wind paused, until Varvara gave a slow nod and raised her rifle to the air, firing a single deafening blast that echoed through the mountains, and in that instant everything erupted, the wolves surging forward in a roaring flood of snarls and pounding paws as Varvara hurled her first kerosene bottle at the ground before them, striking flint to spark the soaked bark, creating a sudden wall of fire that made the first wave of wolves skid back, yelping, though many simply leapt through the flames, their fur igniting briefly before smoldering out as they landed in the snow. She swung her axe with a strength she hadn't felt in decades, striking the ground between her and the advancing wolves to create noise and fear rather than kill. Because in her heart she still respected these creatures, knowing hunger drove them more than malice. And behind her, Arka and Bayan, her two oldest dogs, barked furiously, positioning themselves at her sides, while little Mosca trembled beside the sheep pen, guarding the gate as though his tiny body alone could hold back an army. The wolves scattered, regrouped, lunged, retreated, probing her defenses with unnerving patience, while the alpha watched with that same chilling intelligence, and Varvara, gasping from the cold tearing at her lungs, understood that the wolves were testing her endurance, waiting for the moment her elderly body could no longer raise the axe or spark another flame, and for a terrifying moment, darkness swam across her vision as the pain in her hip flared, but she steadied herself with a guttural cry, remembering her children, her late husbands, the decades she had survived through sheer will, forcing herself to remain upright. And then came the first twist of the night, because as the wolves prepared for another charge, a distant rumble vibrated through the ground, a rumble that grew louder, sharper, until Varvara recognized it with disbelief, the sputtering growl of an old Soviet tractor engine, one she had not heard in nearly 30 years, and from beyond the treeline burst a rust-red tractor. Driven by none other than her estranged son Pavel, whom she had not seen since he left for the city 50 years prior after an argument that carved silence between them like a canyon. Now he appeared as though the snow itself had spat out a ghost, his hair white, his face wrinkled, but his eyes, the same steel-blue eyes she remembered from when he was a boy, blazed with determination as he shouted over the roar of the engine, "Mama, get back!" and drove the tractor straight into the advancing wolves, not to kill them but to create a moving barrier of noise and force that scattered the pack temporarily. Varvara's heart clenched with shock, awe, grief, and love all at once, because she had believed she would die without seeing him again. And yet here he was, risking his life for the sheep she had raised in his absence, and before she could even speak, Pavel swung the tractor around in a wide circle, kicking up snow and ice to form a defensive ring, shouting that the superpack had been spotted by hunters miles away and he came as fast as possible, fearing the wolves would corner her alone. But Varvara, fighting tears that froze on her cheeks, shouted back that she was far from defeated, even at 90, and together, mother and son faced the next wave of wolves, who regrouped with renewed aggression, now striking from 3 sides at once, their hunger amplified by the scent of sheep and the disruption the tractor caused. And the alpha wolf, seeing this new threat, issued a deep, resonant howl that split the night like lightning, prompting hundreds more wolves to surge from the darkness. An ambush Varvara had feared was coming, because the wolves had not shown their full numbers before, and now the valley boiled with movement as nearly 1,000 wolves closed in, forming a tightening circle that even the tractor could not break. Varvara, realizing they were trapped, clutched Pavel's arm and whispered a plan so reckless it bordered on madness, yet Pavel, looking into his mother's fierce, unwavering eyes, felt the same fire she had passed down to him, and he nodded, preparing to make a final stand with her, determined that if this night demanded blood, it would not take hers first. The third and final chapter of that impossible night began with a choice few would dare make. Instead of retreating into the cabin, instead of hiding or barricading themselves, Varvara and Pavel decided to go on the offensive, a choice born not of fearlessness but of calculation, because Varvara knew that wolves, no matter how hungry, no matter how many, feared unpredictability, and if she and Pavel surrendered the initiative, the pack would overwhelm them in minutes, so she instructed Pavel to swing the tractor in tighter and tighter circles, focusing all the wolves' attention on the roaring machine while she prepared the last of her kerosene bottles, soaking a long rope in fuel and tying it into a makeshift burning whip, a weapon so primitive yet so terrifyingly effective against predators that when she lit it, its swirling flames carved arcs of light across the darkness, sending wolves skidding back in surprise. And with the tractor circling and the flaming whip crackling like a comet's tail, Varvara advanced, each swing daring the wolves to cross her line of fire, and though some attempted it, yelping when the flames singed their fur, most hesitated, confused by her furious defiance, because never in their instincts had they encountered a 90-year-old human who moved like a warrior possessed. Meanwhile Pavel saw the alpha wolf shifting its formation, signaling sub-packs to flank the tractor and cut off the circle, and he shouted to Varvara that they had minutes at most before the wolves adapted completely. Varvara knew he was right, and so she initiated the second part of her plan, the part she had not dared speak aloud until now, ordering Pavel to stop the tractor entirely, a command that horrified him because stopping meant death, yet Varvara insisted, whispering fiercely, "Wolves fear what stands still without fear. Trust me, son." Trust your mother one more time," and with trembling hands, Pavel obeyed, the tractor sputtering quiet as silence rushed into the valley like a living force, confusing the wolves who had braced for more motion, and in that stillness Varvara stepped forward, planting her cane in the snow, lifting her chin, and locking eyes once more with the alpha wolf, creating a stare that seemed to freeze time itself. For a long, heart-pounding moment, neither moved, neither blinked, and even the pack seemed to sense something ancient was unfolding, a primal negotiation as old as humanity's first fire. Varvara then slowly knelt, wincing with pain but never breaking eye contact, and from her coat she removed a tiny leather pouch containing the dried heart of the first snow sheep she ever saved. Decades ago, a small relic she believed carried the spirit of protection, and she placed it gently in the snow between her and the alpha, murmuring a blessing her grandmother had taught her. A blessing meant not to dominate nature but to honor it, to ask coexistence instead of war. The alpha wolf stepped forward, sniffed the relic, then looked back at Varvara with something unmistakably close to understanding, and for a moment, it seemed the impossible would happen, peace instead of slaughter, but then a gunshot split the night, ruthless and sharp, fired from somewhere in the trees, and the alpha staggered, yelping in pain as blood misted the air, and the entire pack erupted in a frenzy, assuming Varvara or Pavel had attacked, though both screamed desperately that it wasn't them, and in that chaos emerged the final twist. A group of illegal hunters, drawn by the rumor of the massive wolf superpack, hoping to kill the alpha for its rare silver pelt and sell it for a fortune, had crept into the valley, and now, seeing the wolves turning on Varvara, they fired again, shouting that they'd finish the pests, and even reclaim the snow sheep for profit. Varvara, enraged beyond anything she had ever felt, stood in front of the bleeding alpha and screamed at the hunters to stop, calling them cowards, parasites, murderers of the very creatures struggling to survive, and as the hunters aimed at her, Pavel leapt off the tractor, tackling one of them, shouting that no one would harm his mother again. The wolves, confused, furious, and panicked by the hunters' attack, began to charge indiscriminately, but the wounded alpha, in an act that would be spoken of in legend for generations, dragged itself in front of Varvara, shielding her from its own pack, issuing a broken howl that froze the wolves mid-charge, a command of pain, authority, an ancient instinct, and in that suspended moment Pavel managed to wrestle a rifle away from a hunter and fire warning shots into the sky, forcing the poachers to flee into the forest. When they were gone, the valley fell into eerie stillness once again, and Varvara knelt beside the alpha, pressing her forehead gently against its fur, whispering a promise that she would protect its kin as long as she lived, and the alpha, wheezing, nudged her hand once before collapsing. The superpack, now leaderless, dispersed silently into the forest, leaving Varvara, Pavel, and the trembling snow sheep alive beneath the dying aurora. In the days that followed, word of the old woman who faced down 1,000 wolves spread across Yakutia, then Russia, then the wider world, and journalists begged for interviews she always refused, saying simply, "I did what any mother of sheeper sons would do," but Pavel, who rebuilt her homestead and stayed by her side thereafter, knew the truth, that his mother was carved from a kind of courage the world rarely sees, and on quiet nights, when wolves howled in the distant ridges, Varvara would smile and whisper to the wind, "Good night, old friend," because she knew they remembered her too, not as their enemy, but as the woman who faced them without fear and proved that even at 90 years old, a single human heart can stand against 1,000.